Welcome to our presentation on exploring the adjacent possible, promoting sustainable learning futures through principled innovation. A presentation at the 46th Annual Conference of the Association for Moral Education. We are coming to you from the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University, a new American university, and we are incredibly proud of the fact that we are number one in the United States for innovation. And I should add that we are contractually obligated to say this since we sort of put it on everything that is there around us. But I digress. I want to just introduce the team. Our team includes Cristy, Guleserian, Director of Principled Innovation, Ben Scragg, who's the Director of Design Initiatives, and me, Punya Mishra, Associate Dean for Scholarship and Innovation. And we have a certain division of labor that we have decided on, so my responsibility is to make this video, while Cristy and Ben will take care of the Q&A, which I think is an excellent deal for me because I get to say whatever I want and they have to answer your questions. This could be very interesting. Anyway, to start and to give a little bit of context for our work, I want to go back to February 2020, just before the COVID-19 crisis hit. And basically what happened is that in 2 months, 194 countries and 1.6 billion learners were out of school. This is what it looked like in mid-February, just a couple of countries which had locked down. And by mid-March, 1.6 billion students were out of school. And suddenly we were all part of an unprecedented global educational social experiment that actually continues even to this day. If you look at the map now, there are still 500 million students out of school. And if COVID-19 has done one thing, it has shown us that we live in a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which some people call a VUCA world. It has also made clear to us that the world we live in is hyper-connected and deeply interdependent. And the question we have, how do we make sense of this VUCA world? And how do we plan for this emerging yet unpredictable future? There is a selfish reason for thinking of the future. As Kettering says, my interest is in the future because I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. The challenge, of course, as Niels Bohr says, prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. And here we are in 2020, hindsight being 2020. So if we just do a little bit of time travel and think about what is maybe one of the greatest technologies to have transformed our lives and the greatest educational technology, and I'm speaking of the book, the printed book. And it was the advent of print that in some ways led to the sharing of knowledge and information across people, that led to the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Age of Enlightenment, modern science, and maybe even the idea of universal education. And what's interesting is that these technologies can have unexpected side effects. So there is the possible, which a technology allows you to do, and there is the adjacent possible. So for instance, if we take the idea of print, the printing press actually created hypermetropia because we never had to peer at small little squiggles on pieces of paper. And monks had been using this technology of glasses for a long time. But within 100 years of Gutenberg, thousands of spectacle makers were thriving in Europe. In fact, glasses became the first piece of technology after clothes that people regularly wore on their bodies. Now, there were further consequences. Because of creating these lenses, people started playing with light. And that led to the discovery of the microscope and the infinity that it revealed to us. It also helped us create the telescope. And it changed how we see ourselves in fundamental ways. So the idea of the adjacent possible, it happens all the time. And so here is another example, the telephone. It was the advent of the telephone that allowed us to build tall buildings, because otherwise we would have to run up and down every time we had to send a message. And what it also did is that it created another group of people who were now disadvantaged by this technology. And then we had to create some other technology like the elevator in order to allow people to have access to these higher floors. So the point here is that it is not just COVID-19 that we have to think about as we think about the future. There is also the rapid pace of change in the world that we live in. So the amount of information that you can hold in the palm of your hand has dramatically increased over the past 1,000 or so years. And in some ways, one could argue that the greatest educational innovation in our lifetime is this connection of wires and cables and satellites, also known as the internet. And the internet allows the democratization of knowledge. Some people have in fact called it the second Gutenberg revolution. And this democratization of information leads to things like the Arab Spring. where people can protest and people can bring their voices forward. But speaking of the adjacent possible, it is also what allows Russian bots and Twitter hacks. It allows Facebook and Twitter to be weaponized. And there's more things coming in the future. Are we ready for deep fakes? An Indian politician in a recent election actually used deepfake technology to win new voters. Or are our school systems ready for the surveillance state? Whether facial recognition technology should be used in schools is no longer a science fiction question. And with COVID-19 and teaching going remote, we have software like Proctorio, which are used to monitor student eye movement in order to judge whether they are cheating on an exam or not. And we have to understand that these technologies are not neutral, that these algorithms are biased along the same ways that we are biased. And the question then becomes, what does it mean when we pass on such decision making to the algorithms? Furthermore, there are significant changes emerging in the world of work. Consider, for instance, the fact that the world's largest taxi company owns no vehicles, that is Uber. The largest popular media provider provides no content, that's Facebook. The largest volume merchant owns no inventory, so Alibaba, or think Amazon. And the largest movie house owns no cinemas, like Netflix. So what does this mean for the jobs of the future and how we train people for it? And of course, the elephant in the room, climate change, whose ramifications will be felt in every aspect of our lives. And we could go on and on with all these different kinds of challenges. But what cannot be denied is the important role of education in creating our present and our future. And there are many reasons for these global challenges we face today, and key among them has been a failure to imagine what education can be. And this brings up the importance of deeper values. And this is why our college, in the work that we do, has embraced this idea of principled innovation. Because we know that these decisions have consequences beyond the immediate. That's thinking of the adjacent possible. And so when we talk about principled innovation, we describe it as being the ability to imagine new concepts, catalyze ideas, and form new solutions guided by principles that create positive change for humanity. And essentially it is driven by the fundamental question that just because we can innovate, should we? At the heart of the framework of principled innovation that we call our assets and practices. And the assets are moral, intellectual, performance, and civic, taking each in turn. The moral allows us to identify and acknowledge fundamental values and bring moral and ethical decision making. Civic allows us to understand culture and context, supports collaboration, engaging multiple and diverse perspectives. The intellectual focuses on developing habits of an informed systems thinker and to reflect critically and compassionately. And finally, the performance speaks to designing creative solutions that navigate uncertainty and mitigate consequences. Exactly what we need as we think about the future of learning. And to bring all of these things together, the question that we have tried to address is, how do we prepare for a VUCA world? How do we prepare our students for a VUCA world? At the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, we have brought this framework principled innovation in a multidimensional way to think about these issues. So we work this multidimensional approach with faculty, staff, students, with programs and other partners. And the work spans a range of things, from reimagining the workforce to thinking about faculty and staff catalysts to bring about principled innovation. It frames our curriculum redesign. We have webinars and podcasts, and we have been focusing on leadership programs. And that is what I will be talking a little bit more about now. So the key role of leadership in innovation in developing what we call practical wisdom. And practical wisdom is a moral skill, and we know that there is no recipe, formula, or set of techniques. Skills are learned through experience, and so is the commitment to the aims of practice. But we have to understand that not just any experience will do. They must be cultivated and thoughtfully, intentionally developed. And that's where we talk about this idea of principled innovation meets design, where design gives us an approach to create new opportunities and ideas and frameworks, and principled innovation is the foundation on which we build as we look to the future and we seek to design the future. Over the past few months, we have had an array of programming over spring and summer, and as you can see, we have given some examples here of a day-long convening back in February, and after that, of course, everything went on Zoom. Everything from looking at how do we measure the impact of the work that we do, And as well as we've had some design charrettes to think about how we can create this new programming. We have had focus groups, and I'm going to focus on the fourth piece, which is what we call Learning Futures Leadership Studios. These Learning Futures Leadership Studios happened between 14th and 23rd of July, and it consisted of 4 sessions. And these sessions basically gave a group of leaders the structure and flexibility to develop a compass, giving individuals and teams the intellectual space and tools to design. And they were led by some amazing design leaders. We had Sean Leahy, who framed the discussion in terms of the need for this kind of work and the tools that we need for futures thinking. Now, none of this will work unless we have intelligent, resilient, smart teams, which is where Mino Ipe brought this focus on building resilient teams around psychological safety and adaptive leadership. Any change that we seek to make to do in education needs to question the assumptions that we have made. And this focus was brought by Dr. Brent Madden about questioning the assumption of schooling by taking deeply one question that his team has been working on redesigning the education workforce. And finally, we had Liz Lerman, who spoke about creative leadership and the kinds of creative tools for doing thinking and making. I want to be clear about one thing. These were not lectures or talks. They were setting the stage for people and teams to work and design and then to provide feedback. And in this process, developing practical wisdom through reflective questions which emerge from the PI, the principal innovation, assets and practices. And I think this sets the stage for the future work that we plan to do around sustainability and dissemination. For instance, an example of that would be a series of podcasts that we've been developing, which you can actually find right now on on Spotify or Apple or whatever you use to listen to your podcast. It's called The Slice of PI, which are cases of the work being done within our college around principal innovation. 2 more podcasts that are emerging is one around learning futures, and the other one is called Value Laden. In this one, we have conversation with educational leaders who have brought a clear moral and ethical framework to the work that they seek to do. To sum up, our goal in this work is to help educational leaders develop practical wisdom guided by principled innovation to help them design the futures of learning. We are excited about the next stage, and we look forward to further conversations with you. With this, I am Punya Mishra, and I will check out, knowing that Cristy and Ben will be there to answer any questions that you have. Thank you very much.